Hi guys. Before we proceed to this video, we've got something very important to share with you. Neoliberalism, Inequality and Authoritarianism by Professor John V. Kofis is available for purchase. You can order it directly from the publisher Little French eBooks or through Amazon.
Hello everyone, welcome to this session on the neoliberal dismantling of public education in the United States. This is also taking place in other parts of the world, but the United States during the second Trump administration in the past couple of months has moved forward very rapidly with the dismantling of the Department of Education, which was established during the Jimmy Carter presidency in 1979, and it became operational under congressional mandate. This is a congressional mandate department. This is not in the domain of the executive branch of government. Therefore, it cannot be unilaterally dismantled by the president. Clearly, we have seen in the past couple of months the defiance of the executive branch of court orders directing the president and the administration to reverse some of the policies that it has been pursuing with regard to dismantling departments. We will see what evolves with all of this insofar as what happens with the management of various duties of the Department of Education, everything from managing the $1.8 trillion, this is trillion dollars, 1.8 trillion in student loans. This is debt by students who have pursued this mostly for college level studies, as well as the very important function of the Department of Education, which is data collection, who would be doing the data collection across the United States. Now, this is a much larger issue because public education as a concept that began to take root in the late 18th century and really in the 19th century, countries of the Western world moved very rapidly forward to go ahead and build public schools and gradually make education compulsory. The idea of public education is not merely to serve the business community. Clearly, there is a convergence between the rise of industrialization of the Western world and public education, because the manufacturing sector, as well as the service sector, everything from banking, insurance, logistics, and so forth, needed a an educated public. But the idea of public education is also to enhance the creative potential of citizens. The idea is to make them more well-rounded, better citizens, more responsible in terms of a collective responsibility for each other, and to unleash the creative potential of the individual, which in turn benefits society. Neoliberalism, which of course has its roots in the ideological roots in the 1930s, it began to really take off with the business community in terms of support by businesses for governments to implement neoliberal education, which means privatization of education. Starts in the 1970s with an experiment in Chile under the dictatorship of Augusto Pinochet. It then becomes policy in the United Kingdom under Margaret Thatcher. And Ronald Reagan also in the 1980s moved toward transferring money from public education into charter schools and private schools, undermining public education, and then turning around and arguing, well, public education is not good enough. It's not serving the community. Obviously, as the resources were drying up because the government shifted much of that to private education and never funded fully, whether at the local level, by the way, state level or federal government level, never provided sufficient funds for faculty, for buildings, and so forth. So what we have is public education undermined um, in this regard, and the argument made then by apologists of neoliberalism, that is privatization, making education no different than any business, giving it to the business community essentially, and running it like a business, and having the student viewed as a commodity, rather as a consumer, rather, and pursuing education for profit to serve the business sector rather than to create a society of creative individuals pursuing self-awareness and enriching society as a whole. There's another dimension in all of this that is very troubling about what the Trump administration is doing, and that is it is using dismantling of public education, and it is using federal funds going to colleges and universities to force them, essentially blackmail them into ending DEI, as it's called, diversity, equity, and inclusion policies. Now, this means marginalizing the already marginalized minority populations as well as the working class, and making education a luxury which can be afforded by the wealthy, which is exactly what was the case before the Enlightenment era in century. Education was the domain of those who could afford it. That's who went to school. There was no public school. The other very tragic aspect of what is happening, and this is discussed at length in the analytical video that I invite all of you to watch, is that um, the far right wing think tanks, which are well funded by neoliberal billionaires and multimillionaires who want the end of public education as an ideal, but at the very least, they would like a public education that is very weak and want to continue to strengthen private education. One of the dire aspects of that is that it goes to the heart of attacking a concept we call in scholarly literature cultural diffusion. Cultural diffusion has been a reality, whether people are articulated as such or not, for ever since the dawn of civilization, which starts, of course, in Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq. For 5,000 years, the societies that pursued cultural diffusion, that is inclusion of different cultures, are the ones who made the best progress in society. And whether, for example, it was 5th century Athens, whether it was 1st century Roman Empire, these are the societies that really, England as an empire, regardless of the fact that the imperial policies of England, of course, had a devastating effect on the people that they colonized and exploited their labor and resources. Still, cultural diffusion accounted for the vast power of these societies, whether in the domain of economics, technology, industry, the arts, and so forth. You have basically a reality that history for 5,000 years has proved, and that is that cultural diffusion, that is not marginalization that the right-wing neoliberals are pursuing, but inclusiveness of all people is a catalyst to progress. In the longer video, I point out, by the way, that the recent Trump administration attacks, especially on higher education and using federal funds as the bait, cutting federal funds unless they stop with diversity, um, equity, and inclusiveness, is an attempt to create an ideologically narrow right-wing educational system that serves Wall Street and the far right, rather than an education system by its very nature. By the way, I was an educator for decades. Education by its nature means openness, openness to idea. Albert Einstein was a very good example of this concept. Albert Einstein, who very much supported the product of the Enlightenment era, very much supported the ideals of merit-based system of the Enlightenment, and supported the idea of educating people for their own edification and, by extension, strengthening society as a whole, enriching society, rather than a narrow goal of making someone rich, by the way, and conforming to right-wing politics. Those are the goals of the neoliberals in the United States today. Education is not that, has not been that ideally, and it is now under attack. Now, the question is, to what degree will the Trump administration challenge court directives to reverse this once these cases, every one of these cases, by the way, has wound up in court. And once these cases do wind up in court, to what degree will the Justice Department in the United States challenge the judicial branch of government, thereby inviting a constitutional crisis? As a number of scholars have pointed out during the last 2 months, as the Trump administration has been trying to dismantle a number or undermine, weaken a number of agencies from USAID, AID, to the Environmental Protection Agency, to the National Institutes of Health, in this case, of course, the Department of Education itself, undercutting the very values of the Enlightenment. Just as a last point, and then I invite you to look at the longer video, China, which the US regards as the main rival and which has made remarkable progress in science, technology, artificial intelligence, biotechnology, has been pursuing in the last 30 years the exact opposite course with regard to education, namely highly centralized and pouring money into education, public education, to strengthen all sectors across, especially the Western provinces, by the way, which are the poorest, the Eastern provinces in China being the wealthiest. So the US is doing the opposite of what China, and then, of course, it turns around and complains that they're ahead in a number of areas, everything from fast trains to artificial intelligence and quantum computing. Here we have a case in point of the number one competitor in the United States, China, pursuing a course toward education, which is the opposite of the neoliberal that the US is pursuing. And yet the US is pursuing that course, knowing that history has proved it is not enriching either individuals, that is students, or society. I invite you to take a look at the longer video. I ask you to write questions, comments, and to please join this channel. This is an educational channel. Speaking of education, this is an educational channel. My very good friend Asad Ali manages the channel, and I ask you to become followers, members of this channel. Thank you very much. Thank you.